those who figure out how to navigate nimbly within this set of versatile skills is going to be the person and the organization that is invited to the team or invited to work with a powerful organization. Those are the teams that are going to win.
Welcome to the Next Insights podcast, intersecting science, technology, and consciousness. I'm your host, Michael Morrissey, strategic futurist and founder of Next Collabs. This podcast explores the transformative potential of generative AI and its many applications for personal, professional, and business growth. Join us where we celebrate the next insights, those aha moments that shift your point of view and open the door into the next paradigm. You'll hear the latest ideas and thought-provoking conversations with industry experts, authors, thought leaders, equipping you with the strategies to harness the relentless pace of change in the AI era. Whether you're a CEO, leader, or interested in personal growth, this podcast will give you the insights to leverage AI to amplify human potential and consciously shape the future for humanity first. Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the Next Insights podcast. Today I'm joined by Marti Konstant, who is a colleague and the Director of Agility and Communications at Next Collabs, and is a workplace futurist, an author of Activate Your Agile Career. She recently coined the term AIgility on how to adapt to AI and the future of work. Today we're going to explore this question: will AI seriously affect the future of jobs? Pause. The answer is probably yes. At least 4 different research teams have conducted studies on the work required by 1,016 different professions, indicating a significant overlap between human and AI job capabilities. These studies suggest a future where AI takes on not just repetitive tasks, but also complex, creative, and highly compensated work, i.e., white-collar work. Only 36 out of 1,016 job categories had no overlap with AI, including dancers, athletes, and mechanics. These jobs are primarily physical, highlighting AI's current limitation as, quote, disembodied. However, even in these fields, AI integration is becoming more prevalent, with professionals such as roofers beginning to utilize AI for tasks like marketing and customer service. That passage comes from Chapter 6 of AI as a Coworker in Ethan Mollick's really great book that just came out in the past month, Living and Working with AI. And today's theme for the episode, AIgility and the Augmented Workforce. Really excited to have you here, Marti, on the show.
So happy to be here, Michael, talking about agility, career agility, the future of work, something that I have been focusing on quite a bit in the last 12 years.
So to answer that question, maybe we could start with that. Will AI seriously affect the future of jobs? As a workplace futurist, you've seen the kind of arc and the shift over time where we moved from like the old rules of work, as Gary Bowles would say, where, organizations and the workforce kind of operated more like a factory, very siloed. Then we moved to the digital age and agility. And, what's next?
So AI is affecting most individuals in the workplace every day. The secret is many people are hiding this fact. We call this the shadow effect of AI. People are either unwilling to acknowledge that they're getting ahead of other workers because they're using some of the tools smartly, or their organizations may have rules against using it. A recent Salesforce study said that many organizations don't even have the approval in place for individuals to use AI, but they are using it on their own, on their computers, and in very clever ways so that they can keep their jobs and they're not the ones that are let go when other people are let go.
Now, maybe just to kind of zoom out a little bit on, the history or the theory around organizational sort of workforces and moving from, let's say, lean to design thinking to agile thinking. Maybe just give us a kind of overview of the backstory before we get to AI.
Sure. So Agile thinking first came into my purview when I was working as a VP of marketing for a technology company. And I noticed that engineers were using agile methodologies to create, develop, and launch software products. Did some little bit more digging and found out that they were working with this idea that was launched in the year 2001, this idea of agile software development. Of course, some of these things happened earlier than that. However, this is when it was formalized, and this is when agile thinking and agile systems were applied to other professions beyond engineering, like marketing, like HR. And you might ask, the viewers may ask, well, what is agile methodologies? It's a way of working that's different than the way that it was before. It used to be very sequential, and things were not done in parallel. They were done in long lead time. Software used to be developed over a year or more. Then it would be launched, a big launch. And then the rest of the year, we as employees would spend the time ironing out all the bugs. Now it is faster and it is iterative, and it makes sense because we're doing incremental improvement along the way rather than launching something that's almost broken before it starts. That's where it started in the software world, and it has gone all the way through agile transformation within organizations. So it's a way of thinking. It's collaboration. It's not working in silos. It's responding to change with incremental adjustments in a number of ways that makes it a more flexible framework for working rather than something that's rigid and flexible and it's kind of hard to work into the way that we as human beings think.
Does agile thinking, is that a consequence of, lean methodology and design thinking, and then the agile kind of revolution occurred? I gather there was that agile manifesto in 2001. So it probably precedes, lean thinking methodology and design thinking.
Well, actually, design thinking precedes all of it in the 60s and 70s. So a lot of these things were done in parallel. Eric Ries popularized lean product methodologies for developing software and products in general, about within the last 20 years. So a lot of this was done concurrently. Although lean is not called out as a special aspect of agile, I always call it out because what lean product development relies on is you get a minimum viable product. You test it with your customers. You get feedback. You make adjustments. You do this with a smaller audience. And then you make the changes and you create a product incrementally, very similar to agile. And you launch a product that maybe a lot of soft launches along the way instead of a big bang launch like we used to have with software.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. It also matches the accelerating sort of cycle, exponential nature of digital technology. I always use the analogy of, the Tesla in your garage. It's a computer on wheels. It's constantly updating. Your iPhone is constantly updating. We moved into this period of constant updates. So it's actually developing, in tandem with the user.
Yeah, your comment about the user is an important one. And let's step back into design thinking. The reason design thinking became so useful in product development and innovation is we were doing something unique, like listening to the customer frequently, often. We weren't going into a lab and developing it. We were testing it out, almost like the lean product development sequence we were talking about. So design thinking was one of the first areas that talked about having empathy for the experience of the customer. When the internet was first launched, a lot of websites were horrible. And it wasn't until we got into applying design thinking to usable websites where we would know where to press that button and we would know where to navigate within that website, that websites became really useful, that they became commercial enterprises. That's all due to design thinking.
So we're at this interesting threshold. We have had two major events in the last few years, the COVID moment, where I always use the phrase remote work is work and work in the office is remote. So really the beginning of primetime distributed teams. And then the second major threshold, of course, is the AI moment in late 2022. And suddenly that democratized, let's say, innovation, democratized the capacity to make art, generate images, to become a writer. And of course, both of those things have a huge impact on the workforce and, the workplace. Even the concept of the workplace, I've been thinking about that word. It's no longer a physical place. It is, a hybrid of a physical and in the cloud. So let's start to expand on agility, and then we move to AI moment and distributed teams.
Right. So I often talk about the workplace. Is it a workplace or is it an idea? Many years ago when the internet launched, the concept of working wherever you are was made possible. We were working as global corporations. We were working as distributed teams with global teams all over the place 25 years ago. This was not a new thing. What has happened in the last few years leading up to AI is with developments like the pandemic, we were forced to allow people to work the way that they work best. Many people work more productively on projects with quiet time. So this idea of remote work and the choice of working where you want to work, that is still in flux right now. There's a lot of organizational upset over this. The welcoming back to work hasn't been so welcome, but people do continue to work. And is it any different than it was 20 years ago when I was working on remote teams with a global organization where we had one team in Australia and one team in Korea and one team in Europe? We've been working like this for a long time. So it is just being formalized now. So now we are the bridge to the AI moment. And I think it has a lot of similarities to the internet moment. Many of us have lived through that internet moment. Some of us have had internet from the time we were born. Some of us had the internet a little bit later. That internet moment made everything possible. And that's what's happening right now with AI. This is a renaissance of artistic expression. It's a renaissance of productivity and being able to produce work that is more creative than before. And writing is more effective and more proper than it was before if it's used with the AI as a partner versus AI as a separate entity.
Yeah, I love that concept of, AI as a thought partner. And, what that starts to look at like when you bring that into an organization and your workforce, as you suggested at the beginning of the podcast, that companies are resisting it for the purposes of privacy primarily. They're very concerned about these third-party LLMs coming in, and it's not clear on privacy and so on. And instead, they're sneaking it in. But maybe we could talk about how agility now kind of becomes AIgility when you add AI to the mix. And what does that look like relative to, individuals within an organization, and then the potential to AI power your team?
Sure. So I always like to start with the definition. 12 years ago, I came up with a definition of career agility that didn't exist. There were zero results. Came up with a definition that is cited often. And that was derived from the definitions in the launch of the manifesto, Agile Manifesto. So let's say, what is AIgility? So we'll go straight to that. We won't go into other definitions. It's a curious mindset guided by response to change, technology adoption, optimizing creativity, productivity, and multiplying your time in using AI responsibly. And when I first offered this definition to you, Michael, you said, yeah, I think we might add a few concepts to that. And I can't remember exactly. If you have anything to add to that definition, this is quite a dynamic definition at the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the things is definitely continuous change, continuous updates. I think that's a big one, that we're now kind of passing through that threshold where learning a new skill isn't going to last for 20 years as it did 20 years ago. You could learn Photoshop and you're pretty good for 20 years. You learn spreadsheet, you're good. These updates are coming like weekly, as we both know in our community. We follow this very closely. That would be one. I would say Ethan Mollick's concept of co-intelligence is something that we're now exploring because we're reading his book over the last number of weeks. And I think that one's huge. And a recent talk by Mustafa Suleyman at TED in Vancouver just about 2 weeks ago, he talked about AI as effectively a new entity. So it doesn't necessarily blend into the flywheel that we currently have for agile mindset or design thinking. I think it's actually almost like a separate new thought partner. And Ethan Mollick in chapter 6, AI as a coworker, gets deep into this to the degree that you could even begin to dial in several AI personas that can help you write a book. You can have an editor. You can have someone who's more creative and imaginative as a persona. You could have someone who is just plain speaking as a persona to help you craft a book, or maybe a series of different personas for RFPs. You can start to play with this and get granular about how not something that is part of the flywheel, but it overlaps the flywheel and in a sense superpowers it. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah. And when I was thinking about that, I was drawing in my mind, it's the old equation that 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. You don't have two workers side by side. You have 1 + 1 = 3, because when you're working with another creative individual or another partner that makes you stronger than you are in your area or makes you more creative, you actually produce more and different and novel work. So this idea of collaborating with a thought partner really captures my imagination, because I think every day I'm using AI to augment my marketing brain. I'm using it to augment my content generation. It's cautioned, AI used as pasting the results into any body of work isn't the right way. And I would go so far as to say it's wrong. Don't use it that way. Use it as a feedback mechanism back and forth as a creative partner. Feed your copy in, get feedback from the persona that you've developed that is maybe your creative persona, maybe your logical and your engineering persona. So getting feedback from a tool like AI will enrich your vocabulary. It will make it more understandable. I think one of the entities was the plain speak individual. How can I make certain that that filter is also put in my content so that my work is understood? Excellent idea of writing a book, but it could also be applied working last week on a presentation, working on it quite a bit. It was in its third or fourth iteration, fed it back into Claude and said, can you tell me how I can reorder or reorganize this content in a way that's more clear for my audience? And Claude came back and organized it with 6 headlines, put groupings of 3 and 4 slides under each of those headlines, and made it thoroughly more understandable than it was prior to that. And that analysis took, a few seconds. And of course you go back in and you edit and you reorg, because you are the human in the mix. You are the overseer, and you are making this project for your audience. You have ultimate author's authority and ultimate editing authority for all of the content that you produced, and never forget that.
It's probably a good idea to recap Ethan's 4 rules for co-intelligence. He's got like 4 principles. And then, we can talk about how are you adopting them yourself. So let's just recap them, because I did an episode on this already, but I think it's just one of those things you almost have to remind yourself, because we're going through that phase transition, and it's like, it doesn't come naturally for us to have this concept that we have a thought partner. This is new, because normally it's your spouse or your colleagues at work or your therapist or your coach, and all of those people are busy. So we just don't have thought partners. That's the way I kind of typically see it. But now suddenly you do 24/7, always available, and incredibly fast. Okay, the 4 principles. 1, always invite AI to the table. Like, that one sounds easy, but it's actually harder to do than you think. You really have to sort of cogitate about, hey, I've got an issue here. What if I drop that into ChatGPT? Principle 2, be the human in the loop, which is exactly what you just described. That's our job, is to, you work with AI, but you're also keeping an eye for hallucination and all those different things, confabulations and so on. And we have to steer it. That's our job. 3, treat AI like a person. We just described that, how you can start to, create context and give the AI personas to help you with specific, let's say, facets of the AI diamond, to give you a kind of team of experts to help you design and create whatever it is you're doing. And then principle 4, this is the one that's the most profound. And I don't think heretofore, before this AI era, this is something that people ever thought about. Assume this is the worst AI you will ever use. Why? Because it's just continuously updating at such a rapid level. So going to you, and I know you well, I mean, we've worked together. I guess we've known each other for over 3 years. You've been in the Next Collective for that entire time. And you're like so talented, not only as a graphic designer, you've been heavily influenced by modernism and the Bauhaus movement, and, have a real proclivity for great artists, especially modern artists like Mondrian, Matisse. You're constantly using their work as part of your, incredible LinkedIn content creation, thought leadership thread. And also your thing I've really gotten to know about you is you're just a great wordsmither. So between those 2 things alone, image generation and wordsmithing with, ChatGPT or Claude, tell us a little bit of how it's impacted you, and when did it begin? When did you start to play with these tools and just have that astonishing moment like, oh my God, this is huge?
I look back at my work from a year and a half ago, and I'm a speaker and a trainer and a workshop developer, and I deliver a lot of content and many speeches. And I looked at the content that I was putting together, and even though I had a design background, I would say now it was just good enough. It was excellent at the time. It was the best that I could do at the time, even with my design capabilities. But now with access to AI, I feel like I have access to the salon movement in Paris during Impressionism, where people used to hang out together and share their ideas and produce highly evolved work. And I think of AI as that. So if you can look at the influences of artists and thinkers and apply that filter to it, you could apply 1 or 2 or 3 filters to it. It enriches your content, your written content, and your visual content in a way like never before. You have a group of people that you can chat with at any time. It's also like Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, where he used to invite Abraham Lincoln. He used to invite really smart business people to the table, and he used to talk with them daily. He envisioned this. It impacted the way that he thought and the way that he worked, that they became real. He didn't have AI like we do right now, but he was using the same kind of concepts and applying that type of thinking. Like, how would Abraham Lincoln solve this problem?
I love that idea. I never thought of that Napoleon Hill's concept of this reminds me of like even Tim Ferriss and his book, Tools of Titans, right? He did all these podcasts with these different leaders with their superpowers. And then he just brought them all together and created this incredibly thick book of a summary of all their thinking. But these are like the highlights of, very creative thought leaders. And that actually you can dial that right in, N of one, just for yourself with ChatGPT. Okay, so what are some of your go-to tools? Because you're somebody who, you started with ChatGPT, but obviously you've expanded. And what is your favorite image generator? And what is your sequence? What does it look like? What would you characterize it? I would say for me, I use AI almost like a blender where I put a lot of my ideas in. I sort of see it as a Vitamix. I hit it. It does an incredible job of creating a beautiful combination. I get that back and then I tweak it and I put some more ingredients in and we go through this process. What's your go-to tools and what's your process that you've evolved?
A lot of it has to do with how I used to work at an advertising agency, and there's the creative teams. You have a visual creative on the team, and you have a conceptual copywriter creative, and then you work with a broader team. And so I remember working on teams. I was always on the design and the visual construct before I went back and got my MBA and started managing marketing. And I remember the writers saying, could you just give us some visuals, please, Marty? If we could have some visuals, everything's going to be perfect. And I go, visuals start with the content, right? This is a wrong way to look at it. So we would be going like this all the time. So occasionally one of us would give in and present some concepts. And the other person on the team would go, oh, wow, this is really great. So we'd go back and forth. We took turns being the first person that would inspire. This is how I take turns with myself. Sometimes I like to look at a visual idea and then create content from the visual. And sometimes I like to generate the content first and then create the visual. And I ask myself the question, does this content require visual? A lot of times it doesn't. So I ask myself those questions, and Midjourney is definitely my favorite. I love using ChatGPT, the multimodal aspect of being able to get imagery within that tool. But the type of imagery is more ethereal. It's not really exactly how I want to depict the scenario. Doesn't make it wrong or right. It's just not how I want to do it. Midjourney is more practical in that way. If I say I want it to look like real photography, it does look like real photography. If I want to say that I want a logo with 3 dimensions and I want it to be black and white only, and oh, by the way, maybe we could have it look like a Bauhaus inspired logo and put that into it as a constraint. It knows what to do, kind of. And so I explore and I get the results that way and generate the content. So it goes back and forth just like it did back in those agency days. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? Or is it the creative content? Or is it the visual creative? Or is it the video creative? But a lot of life's rules in business can go back to the creative advertising agency days.
Now, I know you well, and I know your workflow. And I have to say, if anyone has a chance to go to Marti's LinkedIn feed and go to her sliders or her carousels, she's really good at producing really beautiful, spare, very on point, graphically, really elegant kind of a series of images, let's say 10 in a row that walk you through a concept. And she's been doing that recently with AIgility. So I highly recommend you going there. But maybe the piece that we've left out here is that you like to take, your work in AI image generation with Midjourney and the work that you're doing with ChatGPT. And also you mentioned Cloud is one of your go-tos as well. But then you take it over to Canva. So tell us a little bit about how you curate and I've noticed the way you work in Canva. You almost work as someone who's like a collage artist using the AI powered Canva.
Yeah. So AI, for those that don't know, I would say a huge percentage of the population in corporations, especially anybody who has anything to do with marketing or that does stuff for their kids' programs on the side, knows how to use the basics of Canva. And I would suggest that most people are using about 2% of what Canva has to offer. Now, 2 years ago, in my estimation, Canva didn't have as much to offer. It had a data source of images, and it was basically a place to create presentations, flyers, ads, whatever you want that would be more in the conventional realm of marketing communications. But now they have tools that allow you to get rid of backgrounds. They allow you to use AI tools. They allow you to expand. If say you have a 4x4 image and you want it to be 4x8, but you don't have the background to go with it. You have AI imagine what that background will look like, and you click a button and it elaborates. Sometimes it puts another item in it. Sometimes it just puts a darker area, but often it puts another element in it. So it's surprising in that way. So even as an image generator, it's great. And the other thing that Canva does now is the data bank of images are into the millions now, and they have just thousands of AI generated images that they didn't have 3 months ago. So other people are creating AI images in these image generators. Could be Stable Diffusion, could be Midjourney, could be DALL-E, could be any one of these. And they're actually working in putting this into a bigger and bigger and bigger database, so that the risk used to be when you were using something in Canva, you would see it everywhere. Like if you were doing something like Top Secret, you would see it everywhere. Now your chances of seeing the repeat are more slim because you have so much to choose from. And then you have the ability to evolve that photography or create a brand new video of a wave or a forest tree bending in the wind. And you can use that as a background in one of your presentations. So that's a big way that I use Canva. And it's really my canvas for thinking creatively. So I have a lot of areas where I label them. This is my tools and my ideas for thinking. It's my thinking canvas. And then I go back in and take some of that work and mostly put it into slide presentations. And as Michael says, I like sliders. I like 10-page sliders, 30-page sliders. What are the top 37 wellness ideas that everybody should think about? One is, what is in your personal branding stack as an executive within a corporation? What does that mean? Make it simple. Put it out there. Make it shareable.
If you're enjoying this conversation, consider joining the Next Collective to become part of a community actively involved in future-forward innovation. Next Collective is our exclusive membership that puts you at the forefront of AI and conscious thought leadership. With your membership, you'll stay informed with cutting-edge insights, train up on the AI tool sets, gain valuable foresight in what is ahead, and connect with a robust global network of changemakers, early adopters, and leaders. By joining the Next Collective, you're not just investing in your professional growth, you're contributing to a conscious and vibrant future for humanity. It's not just about riding the AI wave, it's about consciously shaping its direction. Ready to be part of the movement? Click the link in the show notes, and as a special bonus for our podcast listeners, use the promo code for a discount on your first month. Let's shape the future together. Now, back to our conversation. Now that we can get a sense of how you have individually adapted in an agile way to bringing that into your workflow, how do you see this now expanding to the concept of an agile or AIgile team? What does that start to look like, the potential of collaboration plus AI?
Well, in one word, we tried it out in Canva has a whiteboard that you can collaborate on and, spend some time there. But Miro, and this is a number of people within Next Collabs, the Next Collective has been collaborating on projects using Miro. And Miro, think of Miro, for anyone who hasn't used it, think of it as a giant whiteboard that anyone can contribute to, not just getting up out of your chair and writing a phrase, You can put a sticky note there. You can put a 150-page document in there as a PDF and have Miro just extrapolate and put that document on the board so you can reference it. You can throw some of your content on the side into ChatGPT or Claude, evolve some of your content. You could put it into some of your systems to get better headlines. And you start to collaborate and put these items together in clusters. We used to do this on whiteboards in the creative world. We'd say, okay, now how do these items relate? And so we would create themes and we'd say, well, this one relates to agility. This one relates to innovation. And then for branding, we'd put all of the images and ideas underneath that one heading. And you could do this quite simply with a tool like Miro. It's hard to describe Miro, isn't it, Michael? If you haven't experienced that collaborative technique, I was really, let's call it, intimidated the first time I got into Miro boards because I saw people putting things. And I thought, well, what if I make a mistake? What if it's wrong? And Brad said, it's okay. We can reverse it. We can change it. We got another copy of this board. Don't worry about it. Let's explore. Let's experiment together. Right. So once I got over this idea that writing up on the board or rewriting someone else's copy, oh my goodness, my heart was just stilled almost. Can I do this? And so when you work that way and you talk about it as you're doing it live, you can do this real time or you can do this sequential. So you go back into the Miro board after everyone's been in there and you add some new ideas, some new photographs that you thought might give you, I think, Michael, you call it the mood board. In the creative agency, we create mood boards for brands. Mood boards include diagrams. They include photographs. They include bits of copy. They include headlines. They get the creative process going to get across an idea. And these ideas can be marketing presentations. They can be business plans. So it could be a lot of content with just a very little bit of visual. So it can be used for anything. It doesn't have to be highly visual. And what I see the team doing is drawing squiggly arrows that connect one idea to another word 3, 4, 5 inches away from where the first idea started. And that's also fun. So I think it takes a little while to adjust to the dynamic aspect of collaboration, but in the end, it saves time and you can optimize quickly, much like the way AI is doing.
Well, and of course, Miro is AI powered as well. And you're starting to see even some of the tools like remove background that are now in the Magic tool set in Canva are now in Miro. And it has also on the sidebar, effectively, it's plugged into ChatGPT 4. And if you ask the sidebar within the Miro dashboard, describe or summarize everything that's on this board, and you could have 1,000 things on that board. It will actually distill it down to, 5 or 10 paragraphs of what's actually on the board. It's intelligent. This whiteboard now is powered by AI. And I always think of the Zoom room as a kind of a 2D screen. And then we just kind of push through into, I call it Web 2.5. This isn't virtual reality, but I think it's the midpoint where the Miro board is an infinite canvas. It has no limits, which is very much like the metaverse. And it's very much like our minds. We're not constrained. Our minds aren't constrained by physicality, and nor is AI. And so in a way, the Miro board is, I think, that sort of third space in the cloud. And we call this the collab at Next Collabs. And every week, every single day, our team gets together for 2 hours and we practice and we run our projects and our assignments through that as a team. And we're slowly beginning to model what we think the future of work in an AI powered team looks like, which is leveraging these AI tool sets and the various workflows that you just described that you use personally. If everyone in your team is working with those tool sets, it's like 1 + 1 equals, I would say some sort of emergent power that is available off the shelf for all of your team. I think that's the future of work and the future of collaboration plus AI. Non-locally in the cloud, distributed teams. Some people can be in a physical conference room, but this is almost like the conference room at the next level. What are your thoughts?
It is. I think it is. And I think what we didn't talk about, I guess if I were to think about my favorite tools, I think, Claude by Anthropic is really good at organizing information. It was the first LLM that really worked well by feeding in your own content, hundreds of pages of content and then summarizing it back to you. Now ChatGPT does that. But it did a really nice job last week of organizing content that we had produced around themes. I thought that was great. And we talked about, Miro being a collaboration space. We didn't talk about a project management software yet, and we're not going to talk about that now. But I think there's room for doing. I've been using all these tools, right? We've been using Asana. We've been using all these project, Slack. We've been using all these tools. Slack has a whole set of AI tools that I haven't explored. I used a tool recently called Go Zigzag, and I created a sentence of my idea of a business opportunity, and I wanted a business plan with a canvas and a competitive analysis of my competitive space. And I described it from the perspective of a service provider, somebody that's a speaker and a trainer. And it gave me back pages of information, told me who my competitive set was, told me where I could tweak and how I might position my thinking. And I'm thinking a tool like that takes 25 aspects of AI and it puts it all in one. This particular tool is in beta, I think now. So I think it's the willingness to test. And I used that tool recently just to work on some positioning statements. There's just an example of so many, or the RAG is short for it's not research. It's actually taking the best of search and delivering your content that way. So it's not the same type of LLM that's creative, but you ask it a question and it delivers the response. Perplexity.io. Okay, so, people used to be confused 6 months ago. They said, oh, that's just like an LLM. I go, no, it's not. It's regenerative, but it's actually going out to the internet and it's assembling the answer to your question that way. And then it's giving you 5 or 6 pointed articles of research with direct links. So if you're working on a project and you want to have a research partner at the ready, you can use something like Perplexity. So I think there are a number of those. So I like to limit it to just a few, like Perplexity, Claude, ChatGPT, Canva, and Miro. People say, oh, well, what about Gemini? What about, all the Google tools? And yes, they are all great. Yes, yes, and yes. Pick the tools that you want and see how this fits you. See how this fits how you think. And then start using them. As Ethan Malik said, invite AI to the table. Like, you want to come work with me today? Just invite AI to the table.
I love that. As a workplace futurist, and I just, again, going back to this concept of workplace, and we can kind of tie this all together. Clearly, the conventional concept of the workplace as a physical office space in an office tower downtown in every major city, and the conference room as the kind of center point where all the collaboration takes place. That's the old model. Clearly, we've passed through that threshold. And I think we're starting to hint at, and as we explore this kind of, the idea of a third space in the cloud, it's kind of like the evolution of co-working. And I think that's what we're emulating as a team, and what we're bringing to organizations is that with a collab, leveraging these tools in the cloud, you can basically have a super distributed team, and it can constantly sort of, in an agile way, let's say, work with the continuous change that is upon us. And one thing I'll note about Miro is that, again, it's persistent. I think this is a really important concept, is AI is going to become persistent. As you know, in the past week, ChatGPT just got memory, where it actually can remember the chats in the sidebar. And so that's the beginning. Personal AI is going to go through that persistent sort of threshold. So you have persistent AI that actually doesn't need to be refreshed every time you're using it. It understands what you've already been discussing. And then you have whiteboards like Miro that are available to anyone, any time of the day, and you just can continuously update it and people can show up and see those updates. So I think that's, a little bit of a view into where we're going. Any final thoughts or, observations or inspiring last words to add to that kind of vision of the collab and the future of work?
Well, I think you've done a great job of describing the collab. I would add to that we're in the process as professionals, as leaders, that it's important for us to deconstruct our roles and all the roles of all the functions within the organization so that we can collectively augment the workplace in a way that makes us much more productive. When, my hypothesis was that if you're not an agility thinker and your organization is not hiring people that have career agility embedded into their thinking, that you're going to be behind and you're not going to be relevant. So the idea here is that if you can know that you are a set of skills and tasks versus your label and figure out how that's done, the organization will be identifying all of that, but it is going to be done constantly. And those who figure out how to navigate nimbly within this set of versatile skills is going to be the person and the organization that is invited to the team or invited to work with a powerful organization, hired by an organization. Those are the teams that are going to win.
Love that summary. Great conversation, Marti. Absolutely love working with you close in at Next Collabs. And where can everyone find you? I highly recommend everyone go to your LinkedIn.
I would say LinkedIn. I'm the only Marti Konstant in the world. Constant, it never changes. Marti with an I. And the only other way is on my website, which is my name, MartiKonstant. But I'd say that LinkedIn has the most current content with a lot of new thinking, and I'm incorporating AIgility as it's evolving with us and for us.
I love it. I think the augmented workforce is an exciting moment in this kind of arc of organizational structure and change. I think we're both kind of really excited to be part of it and want to bring it to other organizations. So beautiful conversation. Thanks, Marti, for your time. And we'll see you again on another episode of Next Insights Podcast. Cheers. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Next Insights Podcast. If you enjoy this episode, take a screenshot and share it with a friend. And if you really love the podcast, head over to wherever you're listening and leave a rating or a review. This helps our show get in front of more people interested in shaping the future of science, technology, and consciousness. Finally, to receive even more insights on what we're discussing, thinking, and reading at Next Collabs, sign up for our weekly newsletter by clicking the link in the show notes. I'll talk to you next week, but until then, consciously embrace disruption, my friends.